The administration and the House Intelligence Committee chairman talking about possible weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons at the hands of Muammar Gaddafi, believed to have been in Libya at one point, and they don't know if they're under control currently. In fact, they doubt that they are, but there are question marks tonight as the hunt for Gaddafi continues and the fighting continues in Tripoli. We're back with the panel. How big a concern, Chris, and the question marks about who the rebels are and how this Transitional National Council will deal with all of this in the next, let's say, 48 hours if they take over. Right.
There's two troublesome scenarios. Troublesome scenario one is that you end up slipping into something like they have in Egypt now, where the Islamists become ascendant and that the stability slips further in the region, more of this Arab fall instead of the Arab Spring. So that's like a long-term structural concern because we don't know about the rebels and their ability to unite this disparate country. The larger concern, though, is that in the southern part of Libya, it is a lawless zone. This is a place where Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb operates freely. This is a place that could come to resemble Somalia, could come to resemble Yemen, these other places where terrorists operate freely. And we should remember that these guys in that branch of Al-Qaeda recently were uncovered trying to poison massive drinking water reservoirs in Europe and Spain. These are serious bad chappies, and there is a possibility now that there'll be no controlling legal authority to deal with this part of that country.
David, the administration at one point months ago said, was asked about the WMD possibilities or the chemical weapon mustard gas possibilities, and the answer came that it was largely believed that it had been destroyed. And now we hear from intelligence officials and the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, even the administration, saying, yes, we have concerns about some of these stockpiles that we don't know about, or we don't know if they're under control. Wonder what happened.
Well, you know, this is the peril of dealing with the Middle East, and I think that in Washington we have a habit of jumping the gun and saying, oh, something turned out well. Whatever our policy was must have been great. And the truth is, particularly in that part of the world, I don't yet know that the president's sort of, not disengagement, if you will, but sort of sloughing off and not being very proactive on the outside in leading and pushing is going to pay dividends in that part of the world. As Chris said, we've seen in Egypt what can happen after a revolution. We don't know what's going to happen in Libya going forward, and we don't actually know what's going on inside of that country. And so I think that, first of all, any administration would be in a tough spot right now, but I think that the Obama administration is in a particularly tough spot because they're claiming victory, in a sense, for their walk softly policy, and in a sense we don't know that it's going to work out, and if it doesn't work out it can really come back to bite him as a weak leader who didn't see things the way he should have.
Although the White House has been very cautious in their statements, the president's been cautious to not claim victory of his policy, in fact, because it's still going on and Gaddafi technically is still in power. Steve, the fighting is continuing, and you know, people sitting at home may say, how do we know the intelligence was right at the beginning that they had this stuff? Iraq, it didn't turn out that WMD was there in big numbers as suspected, or at all for the military who were searching for it. So, you know, people listen to this intelligence and say, you know, how are we supposed to believe this now?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think the fact that the administration had previously downplayed the suggestion that there might be these remaining stockpiles will lead people, particularly in the president's own party, to ask, is this some sort of, are they inflating these claims so as sort of a lead up to a broader U.S. role there? I don't think they are. I mean, I think if you talk to Mike Rogers, you talk to other people
who have access to intelligence.
Have access to intelligence. The way that the story has changed here suggests to me, and this is not based on any additional reporting I've done, but suggests to me that we have new intelligence, and that stands to reason. We have a good number of intelligence operatives on the ground in Libya right now who presumably are collecting exactly this kind of intelligence.
Right, when we say no U.S. boots on the ground, we are not saying that there's no covert action U.S. on the ground.
Right, right. I mean, and these guys may actually be wearing boots, but we're not talking about, you know, U.S. Army soldiers on the ground. But I think you're right about the president's statement the other day was pretty reserved. I mean, I haven't agreed with the way that they've conducted this operation, although I thought it was probably a good idea to do something in the initial stages, but I thought his statement the other day was pretty reserved. He was trying to avoid getting out in front of something and talked instead about a tipping point. And I still think we're at a tipping point.
And this Transitional National Council Council. We've endorsed this as the next government post-Gaddafi, as have countries around the world. They are unfreezing some of Gaddafi's assets, more than $35 billion here in the U.S. that will go to this TNC. Is there optimism about this group? No.
I mean, 140 tribes, 3 very disparate regions of this country. We've got a former government professor from the University of Pittsburgh who is a Libyan expat, returned home, who's a central figure in this. They've killed off a couple of their generals. It's a wild and woolly bunch, and we have no idea really what's going to happen.
And it's not over yet. We will follow it day to day. As you saw Steve Harrigan crouching there in Tripoli tonight. That's it for the panel, but stay tuned for an unpleasant moment.